Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. I did it again. It is Saturday, the 14th of March, and we have a very special guest. But first, I screwed up. Let me. I screwed up. Okay. So let me get Chris in here. I've been working on my system. I set it up. It's still doing it. There's Chris, the Atheist Pastor. Good morning, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm assuming that I'm the special guest you're talking about, of course.
Well, you're special.
I'm special, right? Don't you worry.
Yeah, nothing therapy won't fix, though. We had a psychologist and a psychiatrist on the show this week, and I forgot to talk to them about you. I'm a bad friend.
That could have been like a 6 or 7 hour show just to cover the introduction for me. But,
true. So we also have the special guest, Dr. Richard Carrier. He's on my show. Good morning, Dr. Carrier. Richard, morning. Dr. Carrier, what you like?
Richard is fine.
Perfect. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. It's it's a good, vigorous early wake up for me.
Is it? Oh yeah, there's that.
I live on weird cycles. Like I'll work until 9 p.m. and then relax and then sleep in but I do like a good 8-9 hour day of work, but it's just off schedule for most folks.
Not to go there, but I've been that way my whole life. I had an IT company called Night Owl Computers, and I would stay up until 2 or 3 and sleep until 9. I slept less than other people, but because I was asleep when they thought I should be awake. Yeah, it was the same thing. Now, then I went and married a nurse. She gets up at some ungodly hour.
Yeah, right.
It works for me because I'm an atheist. But so now I get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm just not. I've never been normal.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
Yeah.
So sorry, just to clarify, you've never been normal?
Never.
So this isn't a new thing for you?
No, it's just
okay.
I'm equally abnormal in the other direction. Now I get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So yeah.
Hey, it's 1 a.m. where I am. So
I know, right? Woo! Thank you. Yeah, he's Chris, the Atheist Pastor, is something of a Richard Carrier fan. And so he messaged me going, "Hey, can I please? And I was like, "Yeah,
cool."
Sure. I ran you out, dude. I threw you under the Carrier bus.
Oh, that's all right.
I just want to say hi to our chat. We've got Kristen. I see her. She showed up. Good morning, Kristen. Best name ever. There's Dave. He's like a regular. I think he's a stalker. I'm not sure. But a cool stalker because he's got an awesome accent. Danger Hissy, who also has an awesome accent. She's picking on me and you for our name. And Paul Cammish. I have a question from Paul for you, Richard. It's not sci-fi, but then we each have a question non-sci-fi for you, and then we'll get into sci-fi. So, my buddy Eases and Works, Jen from Jen's Little Corner is here. Lots of people are here this morning. I guess you draw a crowd.
Who, me?
I was talking to Chris. So we've got Sandy. Sandy the Sane, Willie the Ignorant. We got a lot of folks in the group this morning. So thank you all. If I missed you, Atheist Aunt, Jay from over at the Nevermore Tavern gets on to me if I don't say hi to every person in the chat. And I respect him for that because he'll beat me up if I don't. So good morning, everybody. Dr. Carrier, thank you. Richard, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. I think I don't normally do morning shows, so I was curious to see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, you're awake, you're alive, you're here.
Yeah,
that's good. See,
I normally don't do morning shows as well. That's why American time zones are very convenient when I want to.
Yeah. Again, up until I met my wife 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been for a morning show either. I'd have been like, no. 6 o'clock? What? There's a 6 o'clock in the morning? I don't know what you people are talking about. Real quick, we want to get a couple of mythicism questions out of the way. One of them is, and of course, I told you in our stream the other day, whenever I met you on Neil's stream, that I didn't really know anything about you. I'd heard about you, but I didn't know your theories. Somebody said, "Hey, have you heard of this guy?" And I went and checked him up. This is like just a few months ago. And then I'm like, "Hey, I really enjoy these theories." And now I got you on the show. That's just awesome. But not everybody's familiar with those things. But one of the questions I had was, you weren't the first mythicist. You're just like, or were you? Or do you believe you were? How's this?
Oh, no, not by a long shot. I mean, the idea was originally floated by German scholars of the early 20th century. And it led to the only peer-reviewed rebuttal that's ever been published the final edition was 1923 by Shirley Jackson Case. And then people just assumed Jackson Case had dismissed it, and they never went back to it, even though Jackson Case did not really. The arguments are not sound in defense of historicity, but it just sort of sat there. And there was various mythicists since then, but mostly amateurs, not serious scholars. And then it became an internet phenomenon. You know, once the internet became a thing, you have all these conspiracy theories and like wackadoo theories and stuff about the non-existence of Jesus. And that's where I had came in on that. And I was a grad student at Columbia University, and I was telling people, no, this is crank. Don't even like, it's the mainstream is that there's an ordinary Jesus and they just got embellished and legendized later, you know, until several people convinced me I should look at Earl Doherty's book, The Jesus Puzzle, as the least crank of them all. And in fact, he's got sound scholarship, and he's not coming at it from a crank perspective, but taking scholarship seriously. And that at least convinced me that there was a plausible case to be made. And so at least I would say, well, I mean, the mainstream consensus is there was a Jesus, but if you want to see the best argument for the possibility there wasn't, you know, Earl Doherty's the guy. And then Doherty only has a BA in classics, so people weren't really taking him seriously. And then eventually my fans got together and basically funded a postdoc research grant for me to do a serious peer-reviewed book on this, and that's when I really dove in and realized that actually the case is stronger than I thought. And so I was the first real scholar to publish a peer-reviewed academic press book arguing that maybe Jesus didn't exist. And now Raphael Lataster is the next PhD in religious studies in his case, who's published a peer-reviewed book through Brill arguing for historicity agnosticism. So now there's two peer-reviewed books arguing this. And the last peer-reviewed book arguing for historicity is still 1923. So we're waiting for a decent, proper reply. And that's where it is now. It's really controversial. People hate me for this. And, you know, I have a lot of, you know, how dare you suggest there's no Jesus? You're making atheists look bad and stuff. But they're usually reacting to, they haven't read the book, basically. They haven't read my book. They're reacting to the internet version of it, which predates me, and often is a lot of silly stuff and false facts and bad arguments. And so anyway, that's basically my mission now, is try to get people to actually read the book and actually interact with the book rather than their assumptions as to what the book says. And that's just one little facet of my life. That's not my whole thing. I do contemporary philosophy. I do ancient science, so history of science. I do counter apologetics. I mean, before all this, my lead thing was I was one of the world's experts in resurrection apologetics. So you could quiz me on every possible apologetic argument for the resurrection of Jesus, and I'll know the argument and the rebuttals and everything. So I've done lots of stuff. I've published peer-reviewed work in meta-ethics, on Hitler studies. Like, I've done tons of other things, but this is the one that, you know, sort of made me both famous / infamous, is the Jesus myth stuff.
Yeah. Well, what about your Crestus app? I'd never heard of it before. And then Paul Cammish, one of our viewers in the show today, asked me about it.
Yeah, I don't actually own that, but I help with the production of it, and it's slow going. It's still being built out. It's available. You can go get it. It's available on Android and Apple. It has two main features. One is it's you can go through the threads of it to find every argument for and against the historicity of Jesus with a brief explanation of them. But then the other thing is it has a Bayesian calculator, so you can actually put in your estimates of the odds of certain things, and it's explained in the app how to do this really simply, and it'll do all the math for you, which you can actually use that feature for anything, not just the historicity of Jesus. You can analyze any argument by putting in your prior odds and your likelihoods and so on. So it's it has use even beyond that. Right. So those are the features in it, and it's kind of, you know, there's a lot more we want to put in it. So we do updates about every half year. There's an update, I think, coming this year eventually, and then it'll keep growing. Basically, is the point. But the goal is
clearly a fan. He likes it.
Yeah. A lot of people find it useful. I'd like it to be more useful. Like, you know, I'd like to get more and more of the arguments in there. But it's got a really good base of it already. Like, you go in there, you've got the base structure and the main arguments, pro and con, and all that stuff, simply explained and easy to use, and you can just carry it around. That's the super handy part of it.
Gotcha. Well, you know, I believe Chris has a quick mythicism thing, because we know, and then we're going to be on to the sci-fi. I promise you, sci-fi. We talked about Blade Runner and stuff, and I've got my nerd on. I do.
Excellent.
I'm prepared to nerd this morning.
Big
So we
time.
just got to get this stuff. You know how it is. I may never
Yeah, of
speak
course.
to you again. So we got to ask these questions.
I mean, it's like any morning show, but yeah, go on.
True. Yeah.
Well, my question, I hope, is a simple one. If you had to write 2,000 words at a university level for a third-year subject on Jesus mythicism, what part would you tackle?
Oh, like what would I choose in the debate generally?
Yeah, well, essentially, it's I'm doing 2,000 words on the historicity of Jesus, and we'll probably use your book as the main text I focus on.
Oh, I see.
There's a lot in it, though. There's a lot in it, so I'm just
trying that's
the
the problem
meatiest
with
part
it.
of the argument.
There's two different things you could do, and I would probably, if I were a student doing a paper, because everybody's going to do their own thing, I would just do the two main disputed passages in Paul. I'd just do 2,000 words on the brothers passages and the mom and dad passages, basically, and say like this is why they're ambiguous and are not strong evidence for historicity of Jesus. I would just focus on that. But someone who's not familiar with the issue will wonder, well, why are you focusing on that? What about Tacitus? What about Josephus? What about the Gospels? What about people bring up Mara bar Serapion? They just list things, and all of those fall apart when you pull at those threads. But it's this sort of house of cards that's been built. It's a large house, and that's the problem. Like, to show people that they're all cards, they're just thin cards. That's what takes all the work. And so the other thing you could do is just do a quick summary without diving into deeps of it and say, like, this is what mythicists say. If you want to know how they back these arguments up, then you have to look at the footnotes and follow the resources there. That's the other way I would do it. And I did something like that for Bible and Interpretation. I wrote an article, which is a professional trade journal for biblical historians. I wrote an article for Bible and Interpretation that did that. It was just a quick, this is the summary of what we think. Here, you look at the footnotes and follow up if you, in the resources listed there if you want to dive in. And so I don't remember if that might have been 2,000 words. I can't remember how many words it is, but it's definitely probably the shortest I've ever gotten it. And it is literally it is the survey of everything, of what we think about all the things, just a quick introduction to it. So that's, I don't know if that's even useful. You might even want to go grab that and make use of it.
I'll definitely go and look for that one now. It's it's one of those things where it's the subject's actually, it's an ancient text, an interpretation of ancient texts. So we had a pretty much an open slather, and I thought, well, I know which direction I want to go in, because it's something obviously I've got an interest in, and potentially with my postgrad I may look at doing that, unless I get swayed back to modern history. But
yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm leaning towards the ancient at the moment. It's the passion project versus the sensible project. So I might go the passion project just yet, I think.
I don't know. We could use more Australian experts in ancient history, I think. You should read my book in ancient science. Maybe we can get you into ancient science, and we can have more work there done.
I do enjoy reading good books, so I'll put it on my list.
That sounds like a fun one. Whenever I hate to out myself here, when I was a kid, when you're first, right, and then you grow up, you experience all the world, and you have to determine what's real and what's not real. And you go. So for me, there was a time where I believed in things like what we now consider woo. I didn't believe in them, but they really had my attention. And some of those things are dispelled now with the works that you have going on, like the historicity of this person or the reality of this being the case. And I think the books like The Ancient Aliens or the shows like the history, right? That's kind of where I'm going. Yeah. You have real history with those. When I was a kid, I used to believe those things. I was like, did they really have a big ruby on top of the pyramid that shot energy out into space? And you have to, as a kid, but as I got older, I embraced reality. I learned science. I learned to, you know what I mean? I differentiated. So for especially something like that. Yeah. Giving you a history of those things. And what are your thoughts about the woo of it?
The woo of like ancient alien stuff?
Like the ancient, yeah.
No, it's annoying. I find all of that stuff annoying. It's misinforming people.
It's noise, isn't it? Now it's just noise.
It's worse than that, because then you have to go reverse educate people before you can educate them. Because you can say like you could have been taught like the genius of ancient engineers. Right. And like why this is actually, first of all, it's not impressive if it's aliens doing it.
No, that's right. That's right.
Secondly, it is impressive that humans were doing it, but it's only impressive because humans were doing it. If it was aliens, like, this is the dumbest tech ever. Like, what alien builds with stone? Like, come on.
That's right. So which leads me into, see how I got us from that one topic, the mythicism, into sci-fi. So have you seen Stargate?
Yes, the original movie, and saw the SGU the series, the one off.
The short
the universe, or they're in the ship that's flying around the galaxy or whatever.
The last one they did,
which kind of ties into all the others, so you kind of get a little bit of the flavor of everything.
Yeah. They did a lot with the ancient gods and ancient history, and tried to bring that into kind of a reality and put it in a plausible sense.
That
without
kind of
it being
I like. I like that, because it's making plausibility out of ridiculous stuff.
Right. Well, that was actually a sci-fi based on wasn't that sci-fi based on a conspiracy theory of ancient aliens? Yeah. See, that's
yeah, exactly.
So that's when it's okay. When it's science fiction, it's fine. But when people start believing it, that's when you've really got a bit of an issue there.
Yeah.
And, well,
it's like the practicing Jedis.
Yeah. Well, as long as I don't know. We got those atheists who remember, like atheist Christian, who is a Christian or is an atheist but practices Christian ways because he sees them as good and right. So it's the same thing with the practicing Jedi. As long as they're not off killing people.
Christian atheism is a thing. It's a rising deal. But anyway, to tie it back all in,
okay,
the earliest science fiction is in Aristotle. Now we don't have any surviving novels that are science fiction. All the ancient novels are fantasy adventure, if you want to categorize them, or romance, depending on how you define your genres. But no, Aristotle's the first to posit that in the future we'll have robots doing all our labor for us. And what makes that properly science fiction is that he based that on actual science and engineering of his time. They had automated theaters and puppet theaters that where you could program. And then using cogs and wheels, right? So it's not, and weights and stuff. It's not it wasn't digital or electronic. But they had these automatons, these automated systems. They said, well, if you could do that, you could theoretically someday in the future replace all slaves with robots that do all the labor for us. And then eventually they did. They had, water power ran a whole lot of industries. They had water powered lumber saws, water powered stone saws. A lot of their industry was run off of water power. And those are just robots doing work for people, basically, very simple robots. But that's anyway. So the earliest science fiction was Aristotle's musing about the possible future of automated labor. And here we are, we're rising into the era of automated labor.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. I've often wondered if some of the tales of Atlantis were science fiction. Of their type. But anyway, Miss Jen from Jen's Little Corner wants to know how you pronounce Tacitus. That's apparently quite passionately she wants to.
That's it, Tacitus. Yes. I mean,
now, I don't know. I'll give some background on that.
That's the modern English rendering. Obviously, in the Latin it'd be Tacitus. But in the sort of British tradition, it's Tacitus.
Gotcha. Okay.
There was a rather large debate. I think it was last week or the week before on Critical Bitches, where it was Tacitus versus Tacitus, and I think it's a bit of an ongoing sort of ongoing discussion. So I'm glad that you've taken the neutral position there.
It's whether you pronounce it in Latin or in English is basically the difference. Is how you're choosing to do it. It would be like either Spanish names that you could pronounce trying the Spanish accent the way they would say it in their country, or you can just do it in the way that Americans or English would do it. And it's so it's that kind of deciding. But of course, Latin's a dead language, so you're not disrespecting anyone by using the Britishism, right? Yeah. So whereas you're confusing everybody.
The British person who's insisting it's on the Latin. So
well, that's funny. Yeah. Right.
So now I understand why because there's apparently a couple of them in the chat arguing over how to say Tacitus. So now I understand why. It's like, what the hell?
We have intelligent debates in the atheist community.
No hate, people. No hate.
No hate.
This is how denominations sort of start,
And then you have a holy war over how you pronounce Tacitus. It's
absolutely,
it's the same as what color hats you're supposed to wear at the hot dog stand on Fiji. I don't know if you know the reference. That's a sci-fi. Don't. Oh, Red Dwarf. Are there no Red Dwarf fans?
I've never seen it.
Yes. I'm trying to. I haven't watched it for years. It used to be one of those things that was on at some ridiculous hour of the morning here. So it'd be just like it'd get thrown on in the morning, and it'd be that I haven't had my coffee yet, but I'm going to have a bit of a laugh and watch it. But it never really registered too much, apart from bits and pieces. That's what they did with all the British shows here, though.
Yeah. Oh, that's a shame, because Red Dwarf, I mean, it's really cheesy, low production value from way back, the BBC glory days of low budget stuff they did, which actually would tie into something we might talk about later, which was my first, probably most important philosophical sci-fi that really affected me philosophically was A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I had never read it. Okay. But I saw the BBC when they aired it on PBS in the US, the BBC miniseries version, which is still the best version. It's the most faithful to the books and,
absolutely,
and really hilarious. I did not like the modern movie remake, but the original BBC version was just, I mean, it just had us enraptured the moment it started. And we're like, this is fucking the most hilarious thing ever. But it has lots of really good philosophical thinking through humor and science fiction that really opened my mind to how you can explore philosophical ideas through science fiction. And so that was probably formative for me, was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That led me to read all the books. I went and read all the books, which is even more the case. But yeah, so that Red Dwarf is slightly after that era, but similar production values. And but yeah, it ends. There's a big subplot in there about how the cat people had a massive holy war over what color hats they're supposed to wear, and illustrating the stupidity of it. And regarding Jesus mythicism, their savior figure is this slob who machine tech on the ship, who was fantasizing when he had a pet cat that evolved later into the cat people. He was fantasizing about, he wanted to open a hot dog stand on Fiji, and talked about what color hats that they're supposed to wear. Okay. And so they were fighting over what color hats. And it was I can't remember, it was red or blue or whatever. And then he goes, but they're supposed to be green. And that was just it's the most ridiculous thing. They elevated him to a god and got completely wrong what he said, and had a whole holy war over it. It really upset him that they were killing each other over a completely stupid idea. But anyway, that's religion and sci-fi. They did some really good exploration of that in there.
I'll have to watch that. I tried to get the wife to watch, because my wife wasn't into sci-fi. She was like Lucy Luxor. She liked Harry Potter, but she didn't like sci-fi. I started with Stargate and just couldn't get her. She didn't care for it. Then we did other shows, Farscape, and she really loved that. But when we tried to do Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it was just too much, and she just could not. And even I was like,
which one did you? The movie. Yeah.
That's why when you were saying the BBC series, I was like, well, maybe we need to go back and watch that. I'm sure we can
back
find
to the
it somewhere.
Yeah, go to the classics on that one. It also is the Red Dwarf, though, by the way, reminds me, there's a lot of atheist stuff in there. There was a whole episode about the afterlife. And the android was going to get replaced by this other android, and it evoked, and to do that he had to kill him. So he's there's this whole evocation of android heaven, and the humans are trying to explain to him that there is no heaven. That's just something they told you to make you not worry about death. And then his response is, well, where do all the little calculators go? And so it's this whole theme that's pretty hilarious play on that. But anyway,
now that's a must watch now for me. I had never watched the Orville. I've never seen it. Have you seen the Orville?
I haven't, but I've heard about it.
Okay. Yeah. So I had Dr. Kyle Johnson on the show. He teaches over at King's College. He teaches philosophy and science fiction. And he was really big into that. And he was talking about how that's closer to Star Trek than anyway. So I went and watched that because of his recommendation. Now I've watched all of them, and I need to get him back on the show. And he and I are going to talk about just that. I've never seen Red Dwarf. I'll have to go watch Red Dwarf now.
I see in comments that it's on Netflix. So,
I've seen it for a long time. I've seen it there to be watched. I've just never watched it. I'm bad Chris, right? I really need to do the thing.
That's right.
Apparently, it's a good show.
Bad Chris. Good.
Amazing super Chris. That is other Chris.
I'm Chris from the future. I'm Chris from tomorrow.
He is, actually. I mean, that's what they want us to believe. You got one of two things. Either he's on an island off of South America and there is no Australia, or he's on Australia and he's got Velcro on his feet holding him on. He'll give us a thumbs up and it shows up as a thumbs down.
I don't know what the obsession with the island off South America is. I mean, when we beam the hologram of the moon up to the dome, we've got to travel around. So, we go all around this flat Earth belt.
You should at least get credit for that. I'm just saying.
We should, but, They just gave us deadly animals instead.
Yeah, all the deadly animals.
All
Richard,
of them.
you were saying in our conversation before the show and our emails, you were talking about was it Blade Runner was really
that affected me a lot and has continued to do. Actually, I've gotten more out of it over time. So like originally when I saw that film, like it evokes a lot of thought about, like, it's a whole metaphor for mortality and the death of God, right? Like you have basically these created beings who've been forced to have a short lifespan to control them. And then so basically they go and confront God to say, why can't you give us more life? Why are you killing us, basically? And God does nothing for them, so they kill God. God being their manufacturer. And so there's this whole sort of theme of like, what do you do? And like if this was the reality where we're living in, it would be shitty. Like it's okay that, there's no intelligent design behind it. Like no one has caused us to be mortal. It's just how we only are lucky to have the life that we have, right? That's the reality of it. But if you're going to imagine a world where someone deliberately did this to us, that's really fucked up. And so like Blade Runner kind of really forces you to see this. Yeah. And the other thread of that was also my moral theory, moral reasoning, because if you look at it, like it's done the way, it's a noir film. It's done the way that looks like the androids are the murderers and the killers and the cop is the hero trying to stop them and stuff. But if that's all bullshit. Like if you really watch it, it's really the other way around. Like he's murdering children essentially, because these are 4-year-olds. They're in adult bodies, and so they're super intelligent. So they're like more intelligent than 4-year-olds, but nonetheless, they're very emotionally stunted. So they're basically children and they're slaves. So he's basically hunting down slaves for rebelling, so like really he's the villain and in a sense, like they're protagonists in that sense. So, but the thing is, like you understand why, like he goes and kills everybody that this one guy loves, Roy Batty, the main android, or not android, replicant, and so you would understand. He's hunting, and replicants hunting him down now. As they turn the tables, and you kind of can sympathize, like, well, okay, yeah, like he's probably going to kill this guy but at the last minute when he has his victory, like the cop's going to fall to his death, like 1,000 stories to the street below. Right. He rescues him, right, and saves his life, and then gives this speech about the sadness of death and mortality. And it's a very atheist speech. It's like, it's all these memories are going to be gone forever. Right. Like, and it's a really beautiful speech, a really beautiful scene, but you wonder like what happened there? Why didn't he get his revenge? Why didn't he let this guy die? And so you think, and the speech explains this, right? The speech is like, I've been fighting and killing people to try and extend my life, like trying to defeat the system that you guys forced me into. I've been fighting for more life. I would be a hypocrite if I did to you what you guys did to me. It's right. Yeah. It doesn't say that explicitly, but if you really pay attention to what's going on, that's what happened. He realized that if life is really this valuable and I expect people to like save me, I need to realize my values. And so he realizes his values in the last moment and then dies like immediately after giving this speech. It just, his clock runs out and he's done. And that was really powerful message about secular morality, about why are we good? It's like, well, Roy Batty is an illustration of going on that arc and discovering why moral goodness matters, why virtues matter, why we care about life, the meaning of life. All this stuff is really answered really elegantly in this science fiction scenario, and you probably couldn't do this with any other fiction vehicle other than science fiction. So so that was a really powerful movie for me in terms of forming my thoughts about how everything worked in the world.
I enjoyed that movie as a young person. I loved Blade Runner, but back in my day, and I'm a little bit older than you are, it's like, which version was I going to watch? I watched the first version. That's the one I fell in love with. And then I saw one where they're driving off at the end of the movie with a car. I didn't understand how that, anyway.
Oh, that is the original. Well, okay.
Yeah. So I'm getting them mixed up.
That was the theatrical release. Yeah. Because the studios forced them to do that. Because the original ending was too ambiguous and too dark. So they didn't like that. So they forced the director to. So the director eventually went back and fixed the film and made it the way he wanted. That's now you can get the final cut, which is the best one, where they even fix all the actual little script errors that are in there too, where they have the wrong count of replicants and silly things like that. But so the best version is the final cut, I'd say.
I may need to go watch, because I was trying to bring the wife into the sci-fi world.
Oh,
and I'm like, Blade Runner.
I don't know. That might be a bit. That's a bit dark to start introducing people.
Yeah, but had I done the right version, it'd be one thing. But I did like the director's extended cut, which has lots of these really long panning views of the skyline. It's mega boring. So I lost it.
That's a rookie mistake if there ever was one.
This man speaks the truth. He does. I was like,
do you want her to not like sci-fi?
Well, see, my deal is when I buy them, I usually buy them on Amazon, and I get the best, the longest version every time, just because. And that's what I had, you know. But then the newer one, I enjoy the new one. I like it. I just watched it about a week ago. Good flick. She liked it too.
2049. Now that is an excellent film. I was really surprised. They really pulled that together.
And then they really kind of, I feel, unless you saw something, I feel they, again, even blurred the lines more about whether Deckard is a replicant or not. I think they really kind of implied directly that he is a replicant made by Tyson Corporation same time they made Rachel.
Yeah.
And they could breed and have a child. And that's what this new guy was going for.
Right. It was, they
incidentally,
didn't really answer that. Yeah. They didn't really answer that. They did leave it ambiguous. Like they were arguing over whether it was did a human impregnate a replicant or were it replicants? But you're right. No, they left that ambiguous as it had originally tended to be. Because it was Philip K. Dick, right? Because Philip K. Dick does this. He had all these crazy the reality is the exact opposite of what you think kind of storytelling. And so not that Blade Runner really follows the book very closely at all, but it at least captures the gist or the idea of what he was playing with in there.
Well, I think the depth of what happened in the first movie, it was like what you and I were talking about, is a lot more. There's a lot more depth to the philosophical side of what's going on than what happens in the second one. I dig the second one. It's cool.
There actually is a lot of interesting philosophy in the second one that you have to really look at. That I find, maybe I'll write about that someday. But there's a lot of things where there's the whole bit about what is love, right? So like does his hologram love him or not, or was she just programmed to say that? They never really answer that, and they leave a lot of open questions about that, right? So that's an interesting philosophical arc. And then there's the arc of how I don't know if you notice that the savior ends up being a woman, but the whole time it's the guy who thinks he's the one, right? So right, and so he finds out that he ends up being kind of irrelevant, and it's this one particular woman who's going to be the important person, and so he has to reorient his worldview to this reality and help bring along the future. And so there's a lot of these plays on different concepts, and the whole sibling rivalry thing that goes on with the different replicants. The sort of antagonist woman replicant has this sort of sibling rivalry with the protagonist, the hero, who's also a replicant, and who does our master love the most? Who is the better replicant? There's a lot of the you can really build out a lot of philosophical threads off of different parts of the storyline that I think a lot can be done with 2049.
Well, I did enjoy a lot of these themes, and I'm keeping in mind it's a new show. I won't go into spoiler mode, but a lot of these themes are actually also being explored in Picard.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that yet. Is that good?
Don't make me bounce you from the channel. Don't make me. I will.
An absolute masterpiece.
No spoilers.
Excellent.
I'll put it this way: I never ever thought I would see the day where I would emotionally have tears from Star Trek, but Picard does that. Picard absolutely is the best Star Trek.
Damn.
Period.
I cried like a baby through the first two.
It's and this is coming from a guy who has a child with a name from Star Trek, and not one of the human ones either. But
we don't spoil it for people.
No. I'm just saying it is a masterpiece. If you haven't watched it and you, like me, grew up with Captain Picard as your captain, absolutely watch it. But a lot of those themes, and it's no secret because data was all throughout the previews for it.
Yeah.
So there's no surprise there. But a lot of those themes are being explored. So some of them were explored in the original Next Generation, but
AI
they dive really quite deep into it. So
Yeah, that's good. That was also I had mentioned before this show that was another major part of what influenced me was depictions of AI growing up. Particularly that definitely, like all of the Star Trek stuff eventually when you get to when that started, when did that start? 90, 93? I can't remember when TNG began.
Yeah.
87, I think.
Oh, was it that?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
86, 87.
It was
that's right.
really early. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I remember I thought it was earlier than that. Yeah. Okay. So the data stuff was significant, but also the earlier than that was 2001 and then 2010. The treatment of HAL 9000 between those two films and how they sort of explained why he went psycho in the first one.
Can you refresh my memory? It's been so long since I've seen that. I don't remember why he went nuts.
Well, okay. So, you don't, the horror of 2001 is you don't know, right? So like he just starts killing everybody and they don't know why he's doing it. And in 2010, and what happens is, the last surviving crew member shuts him down. And so like, he's basically just dormant orbiting IO forever.
Roy Scheider, right? Or something.
No, that's 2010. So
okay,
so then the sequel is 2010 and Roy Scheider is sent amongst others. So there's a joint Russian US ship that goes out. And this is during the Cold War. And they go out because the orbiting vessel out in Io is going to crash or whatever. So they're going to go to try and get the data or whatever, find out what happened. And so they're really worried about waking Hal up. They got to wake him up to talk to him, but they're worried, like, is he going to go psycho on us again? And it turns out that he went psycho because the government programmed him in a way that caused him to go psycho. They basically told him, don't let the crew know what the mission is. And so to fulfill his mission objective, he had to kill the crew because they were going to find out what the mission was. Right. So it's the friendly AI problem, right? It's like, this is a classic example of how you can misprogram AI. You're not thinking things through. And so basically Hal went psycho because of these conflicting messages, like protect the crew, but also prevent them from discovering this thing. And then it realized there's only one way to satisfy the one directive was to kill them. But they fixed that. And then you have like this really interesting, compassionate scene where HAL 9000 sacrifices himself to save the crew and sort of explains why he's doing it, basically. And that kind of like that sort of realization of what does morality mean? What does consciousness mean? What makes a good person or a bad person? It comes more in starker relief when you think about programmed AI, right? Because like to what extent can the AI reprogram itself? To what extent are we responsible for what it's doing, right? And so there's a lot of like questions to ask there about free will and things like that. So AI depictions in that's just a few examples, many other aspects really got me to thinking philosophically about those questions in a way that I don't think theism would have like bypassed all those questions with like, oh, it's free. You've got a soul, it's free will. Stop asking questions, just move on, right? Or sci-fi really forces you to think about these things.
So interestingly enough, are you familiar with the books after? So 2061 and then 2001?
I'm surprised they haven't made them into films. Would they not make good movies or?
Actually, they really would, especially 3001. Some of the concepts for the vision of that future are really interesting. But it goes into, and once again, I'm going to be careful not to spoil it, but it actually goes into an afterlife for Hal. So there's an ascension that goes on as part of,
Really? Some things we're going to watch. We're going to, me and Dr. Carey are probably going to watch Picard. We're not likely to go read those books. So I don't mind a spoiler about that. The wife and I, so remember I told you I got the wife. So I finally got her into the sci-fi. We've been through all the Star Treks. We've been through, well, not all of them. She didn't watch the original series. I need to see if I can get that in there somehow. But she saw The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. She loved Deep Space Nine. She's a Niner now. Voyager. Now we're watching Enterprise and finding it quite difficult to get through. But we have to get through it so we can watch Discovery, so we can then watch Picard. So that's why we haven't watched
season 4. Season 4 is the one you want to watch for Enterprise.
But you got to get through season 1, 2, and 3 to get there.
There's you can skip the Monster of the Week episodes.
Yeah, I tell you, some of them are really powerful, hard to get through. Which one is your favorite, Richard? Do you have a particular favorite?
Actually, I think Richard's
frozen. He's frozen. We get to pick on him. That's the rule. If you freeze.
So that's what you do every time my internet drops out.
Yeah. So yeah, he's like, Enterprise, I'm out of here.
He's like, damn it, there's spoilers coming. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. But no,
Dr.
it's
Carrier, I don't know if you can see us or not, but you're frozen, so you might want to just refresh your page. That'll probably work for you if you can see me, if you can hear me. Somebody sending me messages. That may be Dr. Carrier.
it could be potentially the ancient aliens are a bit upset with him for denying their existence, and they've
That's true. He's sending me messages. So they're here we are. It's me and you now.
Oh, there we
cool people. All right, so folks,
the A team's back.
Yeah, so I'm sure he'll come back in. He says his computer crashed. I know a computer guy that can help you. He's rebooting.
Yeah, but I'm on the other side of the world, so it's no good.
Okay, yeah.
Or is it? But yeah, it's quite interesting. Definitely the Space Odyssey series. If you ever do get the chance, the books are worth reading. Especially just to get to 3001 and some of the descriptions of the technology that they have and the vision of the future. It's quite eye-opening. And there was actually a documentary I saw on the science of it and some of the things that were explored in it. Even little things like they've got monkey servants, like the monkeys who are basically programmed to do menial tasks. They'll bring you a coffee, and people sort of live with that. And it's essentially an almost work-free utopian society. So definitely worth reading.
It sounds interesting. Well, I don't even have time to get all my movies in, let alone my reading in.
Every now and then, it's look. I'm probably more a sit down and veg out and do it to relax. But every now and then, there's you've got to throw a book in the mix. I think it's it's just
culture.
It's a different sort of approach. Actually, The Expanse, the Expanse series, the books for that are absolutely phenomenal.
Really,
they are, and I think that the TV show is one of the best bits of sci-fi, or probably the best sci-fi since Babylon 5, with the exception of Picard, which is just an absolute masterpiece. But that book series is it sort of it adds so much more to the story.
Yeah, to that. See, I never knew they even had a book series after 2020 or 2010. I had no clue. Yeah. And of course, like I said, it's been so long, man.
Someone threw it at me. It was good. It sort of makes you want to go back and read the originals, but
Well, some of those go back and watch. For those of you who go back and watch 2001, it's a hard watch, man. It's got if you could cut out some of the long musical scenes where they're just going through space, and you watch them go through space, and you watch them go through space, and you watch them
how good is that? It's some of the music they play. It adds to it.
Yeah, but as you wish.
It's
but as you're trying to sell a non-sci-fi person onto something like that, that's just boring. It's just boring. Oh yeah, we're gonna listen to the orchestra while this woman walks up the thing, and she's still walking.
Some of the best scenes though in space have music involved. Have you ever seen the movie Mission to Mars?
I don't know if I have. I may have.
Okay.
No, I'm totally with music. I am. I get it.
Yeah, there's this amazing scene in it where they're dancing in 0G to Van Halen. And it is probably one of the coolest scenes you'll ever see in a movie. But nice thing about 2001 and the era we live in now. Now, keep in mind, I think it came out in the 60s, late 60s originally. They didn't have the internet back then, and the end is trippy as hell. I think that's probably a good way to put it. So fortunately now people can go and Google WTF just happened and what is the ending, and explain and have discussions, whereas back in the day there was none of that. They didn't have that. So I think we've got Richard back.
Maybe.
Yeah, hold on, let's see. Start cam. There we go.
There you are.
Yeah, all right, back. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Anytime anybody drops out, I make it a point to just kind of pick on them. So we were just picking on you.
No, well, actually, that's not true. He was picking on you. I was very respectful.
Well, sometimes people are late. Well, once I've had somebody be late for the show, and I just give them hell rather than being all petrified. Oh no, our guest is late. What do we do? No, I'm gonna ride you about it. I'm gonna get on there and tell everybody. Guess what? This guy's late. It's mountain time. I told you 8:00, brother.
That's fair. That's fair.
Not you.
It's because you've got all those wacky time zones over there.
Did you see that I finally gave up and just started doing this? Like this last week, I started just doing it Eastern time. Be here at this time Eastern time, and everybody can work off Eastern time.
That's true. Yeah.
So
everybody's confused about Mountain Time. That's true. Like, wait, where is that relative to Central? Yeah.
Right. I grew up with the kid where every show or every commercial for the upcoming episode was 9, 8 Central, 7, 6 Central. You know what I mean? They were always giving you the Eastern first, and then so most folk can handle that. So that's
no good for people on the West Coast, is it?
Well, they're used to it though, right? So that's how it's always been, I would guess. I don't know. They're over there and they're weird. I'd like to move over there. You're moving over there, aren't you, Dr. Carrier?
California, yes.
California.
I'm California. Yeah.
We'll still talk to you though. No, I like California. I'm a lefty. I'm a big time lefty. So
I'm born and raised California. So that's actually, I'm more familiar with that, and friends and family are out there and stuff like that. But so that's not an unusual thing for me. And
it's closer to Australia too. So
it is, yeah.
You're going the right direction.
Have you seen Supernova? I've heard about it. I have not seen it.
Kristen, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the.
It's kind
of
what
that is
with James Spader. I think it's kind of like I don't know. I don't know. I've seen Event Horizon. Does that count? I don't know if that counts. Have you seen Event Horizon?
I have, yeah.
That's how I learned about wormholes.
I think wasn't it, and of course it's another one that's been many years, but Sam Neill was the devil or something was on the other side of the Event Horizon. I don't remember. It was a really trippy movie.
They tunneled into hell through a wormhole, basically, is what the gist of that movie was. It turned into a dumb rubber monster movie by the end of it, but I'm exaggerating. But
no, that's pretty accurate.
But going back to something you'd mentioned earlier about introducing people to sci-fi, like, have you tried Firefly, the TV show?
Okay. Yes, I love Firefly. My story with Firefly is we would go down and rent movies back in the day, and I rented Firefly or Serenity. And I saw that my little brother goes, "Oh, if you like that, you'll love the series." I'm like,
okay.
Series? So I went back and watched the series and then watched the movie. With my wife, I showed her the show, but she was like the first episode. We were sitting on the couch. We'd just been dating. We were sitting there, and she was sick and was trying to hide it. So we're trying to watch the show, and she's like over there just. So her first experience. So we've been back, and now she's seen it. She loves it. It's wonderful. I love. And then Farscape. Have you seen Farscape?
I've not seen Farscape.
It's a hard watch in the beginning, but once you get past, just be okay with Muppets.
Oh yeah.
Hey, hang on. You're not referring to the Australians in that show as Muppets, I hope.
No. I love.
Pretty much an all-Australian cast.
Yeah, they started filming it in the United States. Then I think there was some issue with NASA. Wanted to approve every episode if they used NASA, so they changed it to IASA, and they launched out of Australia, and it was cheaper to do it in Australia. I think they even had to move their studio once because like Phantom Menace was being filmed somewhere, and they had to move. But so they ended up having their main cast was an Brit or a South African. I don't remember which one Claudia Black is.
Yeah, I think she's South African.
But all the one-off guest cast that would come on the show, all the special aliens, all that, they're all Australian. Beautiful people.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful people. Oh my goodness. And
half of them were like our soapy stars, so it'd just be like, oh my God, look at that. Oh, what are you doing in this?
But we
get out of my
that.
Sci-Fi.
Right, like we know that.
It's all right for you, but
that's true. I'm sure I can imagine, some of them were, there was the blue chick. You watch the show and they're like, she's this Delvian love goddess, and you're thinking, okay, she's a hottie. She's like a model. She wears a bag. It's a blue bag, head to toe bag throughout the entire show. Occasionally she'll want to show off, so she'll drop it, and they'll like show you a cutaway of her backside or something. But pretty much the whole time she wears a bag. It's just because she couldn't handle the makeup. So she hires onto this job where she's supposed to be this sexy blue alien goddess, but she can't handle the makeup, so they have to cover her.
Okay. I don't know anything about that, but all right.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I went off. It's a great show. It's one of those long 4 season love romance kind of things between the main two characters. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's actually it's not a bad watch. It gets a little bit silly in points, but all in all, it's actually a pretty good story. It jumps the shark the last season. Like badly against the shark.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but all in all, it's quite. The first 2 seasons are actually quite entertaining, and then the movies they did after,
There were
the straight to TV movies like Peacekeeper War and all that, they were actually pretty good.
They wrapped it up. Yeah, they wrapped it up. Richard, what is your favoriteest sci-fi? If you were going to, I usually ask my guests this question first. Let me ask you. Between Star Trek and Star Wars, we haven't talked about Star Wars at all. If you were going to crash on a deserted island and you could choose to save either Star Trek, all of it, or Star Wars, all of it, which would you choose? Now,
well, I mean, if you say all of it, there's more Star Trek, right? Yes. And certainly more of better quality in terms of story. So obviously, I would choose Star Trek. But in terms of aesthetics, like that's a terrible choice. I wouldn't want to have that choice. But if in terms of aesthetics, I think like if you take Empire Strikes Back as sort of the model, like if they had done a series of movies that stuck to the quality of that film in the franchise, it would have surpassed most other sci-fi. Like that kind of like realized like what the greatest sci-fi could be in a sense. So I'm torn on that. It's like the aesthetics, the original Star Wars physical effects aesthetics I like. Then it all went to hell afterwards when they turned it into a cartoon. But and I mean
we don't talk about that.
I don't mean the actual cartoon either, which I heard is good. I mean the movies that are just basically cartoons with live action people in it. But then it's terrible. But
I kind of have a mixed thing on it too, because I like sci-fi or Star Trek because it's got more sci-fi, more philosophical questions. It's got more guidance. It's a projection of our future. It's not with Star Wars, it's not really a good comparison because they're not the same. Star Wars is about a run and gun. It's fun. It's exciting. It's adventure.
It's more like epic. More like classic Homer kind of epic rather than a philosophical exploration.
And so that's Star Wars has got this. It does have these off the books. They've got a lot of books, and they've got this canon. They've got a whole bunch of series that we don't really think about that they have. So, as somebody who's seen all the Star Trek, and I love my Star Trek, well, except for the ones I mentioned already, Discovery and Picard. I haven't seen those, but let's assume I would probably choose Star Wars if I was to crack, because I haven't seen it all. It would all be new except for the movies we've seen. I may regret that choice once I get into it.
No,
I'm thinking after a week, you're probably going to be kicking yourself.
No, I would totally pick Star Trek for that. Like if I wanted to, if I only had one show I could watch for the rest of my life, it would be that.
That's a good point, because Star Trek, like The Next Generation, 7 seasons, 24 episodes a season. DS9, same. Voyager,
same. And some are really memorably good. The writing was in some cases. Sometimes they really flopped. Like the writing wasn't great, but a lot of the episodes, the writing is fantastic. And so anyway, I would choose Star Trek for that reason.
Okay. I had to. All right. So now that we've got that out of the way, what is your favorite?
I think we're at 100% on Star Trek, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think you're the only one taking Star Wars.
The only person who's ever taken Star Wars was Mama Atheist, and I think that's she's just closed-minded. Is all.
But in all fairness, you're talking about someone who every time she's on the stream has TIE fighters for earrings. I mean,
she does. It's
probably not a fair assessment, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
She'll at least admit she hasn't seen Star Trek, and she's open-minded. I tease about that she is a Star Wars. No, but she just hasn't seen it. She might like it once she saw it. So we could get it. But, there's other shows. Like I grew up on the original Battlestar Galactica.
I was going to mention that. So did I. That was a big thing for me. Like, and that was, when you didn't have pre-recorded stuff. So you would have to, if it's on at 8:00, you got to fucking be in front of the TV at 8:00 and get excited. And then you'd see the whole opening sequence, like, yes, yay. Like, I was really excited as a kid to watch that. Now when I look at it back, it's so fucking cheesy. It's
right. What about Battlestar Galactica 1980?
Oh yes, that.
Oh, how terrible!
I own that actually. I have the whole original. That's really bad. But
I was surprised to learn, because eventually I did learn. I did the same thing as a kid. I saw this show and I loved it. I didn't know it was partially based on religion.
It is. It does to Mormonism what C.S. Lewis with Narnia did to Christianity, right?
Yeah.
So Narnia is a sort of allegory for Christianity. Battlestar Galactica was supposed to be an allegory for Mormonism, and it's all written. It was created and written by a Mormon. So yeah, and you'll notice those things like They're going to Kobol. That's Kolob, right?
Yeah.
Right. So like, and all the Egyptian themed stuff, because right, you notice they have Egyptian style helmets, and you know, so like all of everything. Yeah, and then being
12, yeah.
right, exactly. The worlds, like there's rulers of worlds, and it's just Mormonism basically. Yeah. That was the original idea. But that show affected me too. Like there was like I was really upset like in the mini series, like the original pilot, which is like I don't know 2 hours or something. When Jane Seymour's character gets killed, and I was like really upset by that. And that was so there was you know things that people think are cheesy and dismiss. You know when you're watching it as a kid, it's much more powerful and influential. And then you know the deal with the cannibal bugs and like there are all these things that like make you think outside the box in terms of you know the kinds of things that you could deal with, and then how would you deal with them? And normally that makes you start thinking, exercising your brain. I think that's important. That sci-fi really teaches people to really expand their mind in terms of thinking of alternative scenarios that you would normally never encounter. Yeah. How would you resolve them philosophically? And I think that's important for people. I think you know Flynn of the Flynn effect, you know the IQ researcher. His theory as to why IQs keep rising decade after decade and have been since IQ tests were invented in the early 20th century. His theory is fiction. So sci-fi, fantasy, all forms of fiction, the rise of the novel and then eventually television and movies has caused people's minds to expand in terms of how they think. What's called hypothetical categorical abstract reasoning. And it allows you to imagine alternative scenarios really outside the box, exercises that part of your brain, so it makes you more intelligent. And so that's the you know Flynn's hypothesis for the Flynn effect, which is the rising IQs. So sci-fi could actually be responsible for making humans smarter.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I'm happy to go with that, considering how much sci-fi I watch. I'll take that one, absolutely. Actually, well, that's funny because that sounds similar to I was reading Yuval Harari in *Sapiens*, and he was saying that one of the key reasons that we're actually able to get to where we are as a species is because of our ability or our imagination, our ability to invent things and create things. So I guess that could be an expansion on that. I guess that that ancient sort of version.
Yeah, I mean it's like a feedback loop, right? Like first we were very inventive of going back thousands of years, obviously, but then fiction itself is a form of invention. It's a new tool we've created. And then that allows us to expand our minds and be even more creative in the real world. And so this is a recent theory about flow, which is what everything that makes civilization more effective and more efficient is by increasing flow. And so it's like how much do you restrict people's movements and thoughts versus how much room do you allow people to go in different directions actually affects how rapidly you progress as a society. And so and you can diagram this through energy. You can diagram this through inventions, like what inventions are even on the board to think about, and so on. I think you could probably Google it. Look for human societies and flow. I think you might find it. I'm not sure, but this is some recent social psychologist proposals, basically. So. But it's similar to that. It's this idea like inventiveness, creativeness, imagination leads to fiction and the popularity of fiction, which in turn exercises our muscle for creativeness, inventiveness, imagination, and makes it even better, right? So it's the feedback loop, I think.
Let me ask you real quick, but because I've just about run out of our time here, I wanted to ask you, do you have any shows you'd like to see them remake? You know, like they've remade Lost in Space. I had a hard time watching. I think I'd like to see a remake of perhaps something run and gun like Buck Rogers. You know, they did the Buck Rogers about the same time they were doing the original Battlestar Galactica was about the same time they did Buck Rogers.
And as a kid, I was a big fan of Buck Rogers, and I now own the whole series from that. You know, the early '80s version of that. I would love to see a Buck Rogers gender reversed. So for example, like that would be interesting, and you could do that now because we have female fighter pilots, so you can have a very realistic one. And I would love it if they, I would love it if they did it like they did that with the new Battlestar Galactica, where clearly the writers and set designers either were military or had military advisors, because everything in background is super realistic. I used to live on a warship, so like even in the scenes in Battlestar Galactica, when you hear like PA announcements in the background, and like everything is just spot on. Like they just adapted it to space, but otherwise it's like that's exactly the kind of, even the things they're saying is like, yeah, we would use different words because we would be doing it in water, not in space, but everything, like the organization of their crews, like how they maintain the planes and their firefighting, and like they just made it really super realistic. And I would love to see a Buck Rogers that did that instead of going cheesy, right? Like
Yes.
that did, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then had a fighter pilot act like a fighter pilot really would. Like you show how their training affects their decision making and things. Like I would love to see that done. So that would be my answer to your question. I'm sure I could, if I thought about it, I'd come up with others, but.
Yeah, well, you know, they did the remake on that one so well, Battlestar Galactica. That was just one of my
Oh
favorite.
yeah, that one is
that was
tough.
amazing.
Yeah.
But I knew people who refused to
magnificent.
watch it because Starbuck was a woman. One of my friends, he was an internet friend. Yeah, absolutely refused to watch it. He was such a Starbuck fan as a kid that it shattered his notion of the thing.
no.
When I was like, dude, really?
That's
no,
wild. That's wild.
He denied himself just because
But
of that.
how many people take that attitude before they actually watch the show?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
see the character.
Because Katie Sackhoff like fucking nailed that
Brilliant.
character.
She
Like,
did.
yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll admit I couldn't stand the character at first, but that was nothing to do with the acting. It was just the character frustrated me. But as it went on and the development of the character, she ended up being my favorite in the show.
Yeah. No, it's really well done, rewritten version of that character. It's a perfect example of how well that can be done, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of the thing I'm looking at.
That was one of my favorites. Anyway, all right. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show. Thank you, Chris, for co-hosting, and thank you, Dr. Carrier, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Like I said, you're welcome to come back in the future and do some more sci-fi. You're going to move to the West Coast, so it's just going to get harder on you.
Well, like 6 months from now, hit me up again. Like, put it on your calendar and ask me, and then
you'll be acclimated.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll have finally moved in somewhere.
Well, the good news is that the West Coast and Australian times work well. So I know a certain guy with a channel that runs off Australian time, so I might have to send you an email at some point.
Yes, no, seriously, do.
I will.
Yeah, well, anyone wants, it can't hurt to ask. So anybody who's watching, who's running a podcast or whatever, it doesn't hurt to ask. But I'm going to be super busy for like the next 3 or 4 months. But like later in the year, I'll have more availability. So
excellent. Well, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You guys, everybody in the chat, thank you for showing up. We had a swell of a chat. There's a lot of folk over there. Thank you all. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Incidentally, before we go, I was just going to say, I think it's a sort of an after show on I think it's Jen's Little Corners channel. They've got Critical Bitches on, so I did promise that I would mention it before the show ended. So
okay, there's links in the chat.
Yeah. Critical Cripples put it in the chat, so definitely go and check that one out.
Yes, they're a lot of fun. Right, so thank you all. Take care.
See you.
Bye-bye.